from Warnock. I'm deputy editor at Sifted, and it is my pleasure today to moderate this interesting discussion about ESG. I'm very excited to be moderating the conversation today because I used to work with some ESG and have consulted with startups at their earliest stages about how to prioritize ESG, what tools to use, and what's important. So I'm super excited. Just a quick little intro about each of the people that is on stage with us today. So as I said, I'm Eleanor, I'm from Sifted, I'm deputy editor, which means that I'm working with our team, figuring out our direction, editorial direction, and then also doing a little bit of writing about VC and other things. Then we have Matthias, welcome.
Hello.
You are co-founder and CVO at ShareP. Can I just ask quickly, what does this V in CVO stand for?
Yeah, that's a lot of people ask this question, and I think I put it intentionally because I'm also CEO, and I started the whole ShareP, and then my colleagues joined me as a co-founders. But CVO, it's a Chief Visionary Officer, because as some smart guys in this industry says, like, you don't need a CEO for a startup. You just need the guy with the vision that doesn't take the pills to really go forward.
Amazing. And then we have Evelina, our ESG expert from PwC.
Yeah, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm representing PwC ESG Hub. Lots of short names, but basically our role as a hub and my personally is to support both public and private sector companies or clients in the ESG journey, so setting ESG strategy, KPIs, materiality assessment, ESGD, and many more.
Amazing. And then on virtually, we're joined by Serena as well, innovation professional. Hello, Serena. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hello.
Hi, everybody. Greetings. I hope you're doing very well. And like me, recovering from a flu. I would have hoped to be with you so that you know how tall I am. I'm 172. However, I can imagine that you all look pretty and you're excited to learn some more together with Matthias and Evelina on ESGs.
Thanks, Serena. Okay, Evelina, would you like to kick us off with a little presentation? Thank you.
Sure. If I can ask for putting the slides on so we could start. We prepared this short deck just to introduce the topic and just to set the scene for this really important and interesting discussion about ESG for Scaleups. So the minute we have it on, I can start.
Do we have someone in charge of the slides?
Yeah, because I'm not. I don't have anything to change the slides.
The magic button.
The presentation. I can start speaking. Actually, we don't need the deck. If it's not available, I can just briefly present. That's. Okay, so I can start introducing the topic just for the sake of time. We thought it would be good just to explain what and demystify the ESG as a topic. So we know that there are those three letters, E, S, and G. So and what this means for the scale-ups in practice. So E basically covers the relationship and the influence that the company, any company, because every business actually, it doesn't matter whether it's a scale-up or a multinational company, every business is affected and is affecting environment. And it's not only about carbon footprint or climate impact, but it's also about waste, about water usage, about setting targets and goals around those aspects. Then we have the social aspect. So those are basically the relationship that the company has with not only workers and employees on its own, but also with the communities and institutions in the environment where the company is set and operates. And then we have the G aspect, which is actually about how the company is governing the organization, but also how it cooperates with stakeholders and the way it makes decision actually to to make those effective and well-informed decisions. So those are the three aspects that are covered by ESG. Then we have the key drivers. I will move on since we're waiting. So in the presentation, then we try to briefly explain who are the main drivers of this ESG being so high on the not only investors' agenda but also companies and countries too. So for sure, it's like the regulatory perspective, and this is also because of the EU Green Deal that was introduced 2 years ago. So this is like the plan to basically make the European Union carbon neutral to 2050. And this also includes a number of directives and regulations that are affecting countries, but multinationals, and then eventually this cascaded to supply chain, which actually will affect scale-ups at some point. So those are like directives concerning transparency and reporting. So CSRD that will be soon implemented, but already existing SFDR and many other concerning non-financial reporting. And then we have also communities and consumers, which are demanding more and more. Okay, I mean, okay, so yeah, we covered this, and we can move on to, oh, yeah, okay, so I was just referring to this slide about demystifying the key drivers. So we already mentioned regulators, and then civil society and consumers, and there are many studies indicating, like the one study that was conducted last year concerning consumers and their choices and how they affect actually whether they take into account the ESG, and it turns out that almost 34% of consumers self-reported that they are willing to pay more for products that are environmentally neutral or contributing to environment. So those are, of course, everything is evolving, like both regulations and the approach that all the stakeholders are presenting toward ESG and the implementation on the concept on the ground. But those are the studies that are showing that this is definitely getting a lot of attention. And then we have civil societies, but also multinationals, which are expecting the suppliers to be in line with the regulations, because multinationals, of course, have to be in line. They are guided by law. The business partners that are part of the supply chain are not all of them are now guided by the law, but they will be. And then we have investors, which is one of the key groups. And now we see that they are increasingly appreciating the fact that companies are starting to introduce or trying to align their business models with ESG approach. This is basically because they know that those companies that are trying to do it or are already implementing the whole concept are better prepared for any adverse changes on the market, and it's hard to indicate right now, like we lack concrete data when it comes to exact data points saying that yes, those companies, because they are ESG prepared, will be better performed, but for sure they are better prepared for the future and even for now. And this actually this is a good introduction for the next slide. Thank you, Mateusz. Here, just a quick overview of the study that was conducted by PwC on the PE. It is a global PE study that was conducted last year. It's mostly focused on PE, but there is a capital venture angle too, and here we are sharing some numbers. But what's really important is, like, we are all aware that there is no formalized or standardized procedure for implementing ESG in startup or scale-ups. But for sure, the topic is getting more and more attention, and companies like capital venture funds, they are trying to, first of all, get more familiar with the topic, and they are willing to require from potential investee companies to take those topics into account. We also shared some shopping experiences or expectations concerning consumers. So you can also take a look, like the other study that was conducted by PwC. It also confirmed that the topic is relevant for consumers and global society generally. I think we can now move on to the next aspect, which is the question. So, what is the main benefit? How ESG allow you to what kind of value it brings, and whether there is any concrete benefit of implementing ESG. Here are three pillars. So we divided it into like top line growth, risk management, returns, capital. But they're like this is like kind of an umbrella of the benefits, and there are like subtopics or subgroups of benefits that you could read under those three aspects. But what is really important is that when you implement as a company, when you take like a serious approach to ESG, for sure you will experience that your customers, existing customers, but potential customers will appreciate you and will give you a chance to broaden your presence on the market. So you'll be able to enter new markets, but also build your stronger existence on the market. It will also allow you to properly manage risks, and those are a number of risks. Those are the risks that are linked to scarcity of resources. Those are the risks, the reputational risks too, that can be a result of the improper supply chain management or value chain management. And then we see that there is an obvious assurance of like the cost of the capital is lower, and then you have both for transaction, but generally you have better access to the capital because you're showing investors that first of all you're aware of the topic. The second thing is that you're already implementing, and the other thing that you're trying to adjust and align to the change, to all those changes and things that are happening around legislative part of ESG, but also the societal expectation and business partners' expectations too. And now I would like to briefly, if we could move on to the next one. We already mentioned what is ESG, what kind of benefits it brings, who are the main drivers, and I think this is like the most important part because now you see that it brings clear value. It is possible to implement it, and companies are already doing it. But what is really important, and I think this is like a huge advantage of scale-ups and startups, because actually they don't have all this burden that huge multinationals already carry. Like they have like open world because they are starting their journey, because those are really young organizations, so they can start implementing the idea of ESG from the beginning. This gives a lot of opportunities, and because like it's in the DNA of any startup and scale up to introduce innovation and changes and adjust to those. And ESG for many is perceived as a kind of innovation or something that is really new, although it is not a new concept, but anyway. So I think it's really great opportunity for scale ups and startups to actually start aligning business model to those principles. And here we listed some of the steps that could be taken by scale-ups to start this journey. And this is also how we work with companies, generally not only scale-ups, just to show them what should be potential steps for them. So we usually start with the materiality assessment or checking where you are as a company and see from both opportunities and risk perspective, what are the key topics for you. Then when you have those key topics identified, you should because you should not focus on everything. You should choose those that are the key for you, and then prepare a kind of an action plan for next 2-3 years, just to show what kind of goals you set, what kind of commitments you are willing to achieve and made, and then how you're going to do it. So you have to have clear objectives, KPIs, and then having this action plan, present how you're going to achieve those goals, and in what time frame, because this is also crucial given that there are certain timelines for multinationals to achieve, especially when it comes to... I haven't finished yet, to be honest.
I'm so sorry.
Because last but not least is about publicly disclosing goals and commitments. This is something that I have been discussing with companies for many years, and this is really key aspect, because you might do a lot of things internally, but if you're not communicating them, it's like they are not existing. So no one knows that you're doing it, no one knows that you're willing to achieve those goals, so you can't take credits for it. So it's really a key issue to publicly disclose your goals, commitments, and the way you are progressing in achieving those. And this brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelina. That was such a great foundation to set up for our chats. I see Serena is clapping. I love it. By the number that you cited in your presentation, that 76% of VCs consider ESG in their investments, which is, even though you said in the world of multinationals and bigger corporates, ESG is seen as, more of like a daring innovation. Really, that stat just tells me in tech, in VC, ESG is something that is a household word now, right? It's something that everyone has to take seriously. And so I'd love to just kick off our conversation by talking about, like, in that world where ESG is something that everyone's looking at, everyone's doing, what are some of the biggest things that scale-ups get wrong? What are some of the biggest misconceptions about ESG? Maybe Evelina, you can kind of kick us off.
You want me to still speak?
Yeah, go for it.
I wouldn't like to dominate the conversation, but I think the most important part of it is to understand that it's nothing, like, it's not rocket science actually. Like, those are the simple operational things that you could address basically by setting goals concerning water usage. So you have a goal to limit the water you use, or just to think about your carbon footprint, like especially for startups, like digital carbon footprint. This is something really important. And also you can start, I know that for startups and scale-ups, like supply chain is not a key topic, but still, if you're cooperating with business partners, it's good to start those discussions at the beginning, just to show them what are your values and that you're really expecting your business partners to align with those values and expectations. So this is what I think is important to understand. But
Yes. So maybe I would say from my experience, in most of the cases, as I even speak with other founders, what they get wrong about that is that, first of all, they don't understand it. I wish they would see this presentation of yours. It was amazing. No, really. Even if I have seen it already before. But that really makes the things easier. And for startups and scale-ups, especially scale-ups, where 24 hours just kind of fade in a time. You don't really know either it's a Monday, Wednesday, or really it's a Saturday or Sunday. It's really, everything goes fast. To understand that it's actually simple and it can help you, because it does, and it does help with the communication, especially that when the scale-up says, oh, we are not really interested in B2G, we are not interested in B2B, we are focused on the customers. But on the end, you get to this moment that when you need to speak to B2G, B2B, and when you don't have the set goals, then it's kind of like no go. You will not even know why they don't want to talk to you, because they know that implementation of any kind of sustainability in your business will take time and they don't have it. And the same goes with the investors. Like, if just in my opinion, why it's 70 and not 100. Investors are investing in future. They are investing in the team and an idea and the execution that you're having. But in fact, they are investing in what you're going to produce. They are planning to have a time 5, time 20, or time 60, some of them even. But you're not going to get it tomorrow. You're going to get it in a year or 2, 3. To have that, they are aware that European Union and other countries are setting high goals, and if you don't, if the startup is not following this or at least building the technology this way, then it's going to be bad investment.
Definitely. And Serena, how do you think that scale-ups and startups can, well, A, maybe what do they get wrong, but also how can you just prioritize? When you're, as you said, you're busy building a business and you're really wrapped up in just the operation side of things. How do you figure out what you should actually focus on?
Yes, I support the comments of the dear colleagues on the panel over there. I would add that ESG started with the act of investment, right? So maybe for some of the startups and scale-ups, there might be sometimes a misunderstanding on the term in itself. If they don't see ESG, but they see sustainable investing, if they see responsible investing, impact investing, socially responsible investing, and so on and so forth, many other varieties of these terms, they basically mean the same. It's the same approach, it's the same intention, and requires a lot of action from the startups and scale-ups. So that would be the first misunderstanding. The second that I can immediately think of right now is that maybe in a scale-up, when you are supposedly hiring a lot, there is a good growth rate in the company, you might expect that the ESG agenda comes from the co-founders or the board of directors, while it might happen differently, right? You might get that from the business developer who is communicating with one of the suppliers, who might get it with the sales team who's locking in the next sales agreement or the next customer, client, whatnot, depending on the industry. So leave all the doors open for the ESG to come in, and not expecting that to be presented only by the co-founders or the guys with the suits. Nothing wrong with Matteo's suit. I like suits as well, but you know what I mean. And I can also see that Evelina has one. Maybe I'll put one later. Still, all of these possibilities actually allow scale-ups to be introduced to ESGs. And the third one, and I'll leave it with the third misunderstanding, is that it is not work, it's not extra work, and it's not just bureaucratic work. You can use it to improve certain organizational processes. You can use it to improve your product deliveries, your features and characteristics, that whatever your offering portfolio is, ESGs can help you make it better. When it comes to priorities, that was the second question, right? How can you prioritize? So I see it in a twofold way, right? If the scale-up didn't have an ESG approach from the DNA, from the get-go, the backbone of the company, the storyline from the first pitch or the first grant or the first investment deal, then allow yourself to pivot and to change. And you can change either on doing some internal assessments within your own organization, like looking closely, mobilizing your quick resources, your best employees. Research actually has shown that the most engaged employees in the company are also the ones that care the most about ESGs in that context, in that organization. So you can do that, or you can go the other way and see, okay, what's my next investment round? Who are the investors that I'm going to approach in this pipeline, or who are going to combine this consortium? Do your own due diligence on these investors. All of them have their own criteria that they measure the behavior of the investment decision, or the startup deliveries, and all the other elements, and then try to fit into that agenda so that you score the next investment round, and you allow for some time in your organization to change that story, to change that perspective, and benefit from the long-term vision that ESG provides.
Super interesting. Matthias, what do you think about the prioritization question? Yeah,
I think I would like to add here something like, I like what Serena says. It's including the suits part. um, I think it's about keeping it simple on the beginning. I mean, you don't need to really make a report that has 60 pages and I don't know what else. You're not a corporate, and which means you have lawyers that have nothing else to do that produce hours, and that concludes with pages. And you can just set a simple goals that your customers also, or potential customers, potential partners can understand. I mean, like make it simpler, even internally in the office. Yeah, let's use the tap water instead of buying bottled ones. I mean, just the simple things, but if you start somewhere, you can build it. You know, the house is built from bricks. You don't order it like, you know, online. And in our case, I can give you a short example. It's not like a product placement. We talked with the huge, the biggest operator in Switzerland about the railway and the communication, public communication. And we asked them, what is your problem? What is really your problem? And then they said, yeah, we are trying to convince people to switch to the public transportation since 20 years. I said, like, okay, so what are you doing wrong? Or like, are you happy with the effect? And they said, I mean, a lot of people more and more are using the public transportation. So I was like, okay, so what's the target customer that you would like to convince as the driver? Ah, okay. I said like, okay, so did you succeed? No. The reason is because if you're making, for example, saying, yeah, public transportation is for free, but the guy who have a car, he will keep on going with a car, and that's it. So you're not reaching to him. So the message must be so simple that he understand, and he's the potential target for the sustainability in this case. And not saying that, yeah, but so we build a solution to exactly convince that kind of person, but on the end. But the point is that it needs to be simple because everybody needs to understand. Nobody will get it a 50 pages statement, but everybody can get it. Yeah, don't buy the bottle, take the tap water. It's a simple message, yeah, you know. And in this case, if you give an example, even as a small scale up, and you approach the corporates as an example we did, it works. You can, and because then you communicating with them with a simple solution, but also in their line of understanding.
Evelina, I wanted to ask you too about the prioritization, and also in your presentation you talked about the time frame that you're working with these companies and how you help them think about that. But obviously in a fast-growing company, those priorities are going to change all the time, right? Their business might completely change. So how do you help management think through that, especially in terms of that time, 2-3 years?
Yeah, I mean, for a startup or scale up, it's like 10 years for any other company, probably. So this is like really, time is an important factor for sure. And when we start this kind of discussion, we always expect, maybe not expect, but we would like to hear from the owner what is at least the plan for next year or two, just to see what kind of time frame we should take into account, and based on that decide what could be the potential priority for the company. But also it's important to understand where the company or the startup is operating, what are the key stakeholders, so what is the environment of the startup and how they will affect those people, institutions and other business partners. So just to, you have to start with really good understanding of where you are and where you want to be. Maybe not in 10 years, but in a year, just to, based on that, understand what is possible for you to do. Because it's not for setting goals that you will, from the beginning, know that they are not achievable. So, and this is like Mateusz said, it's about having like practical goals, simple goals, easily communicated not only internally for your own employees, but also for external stakeholders. So everyone understands what you really want to do, how you want to do, and when it will be achieved. So those are the, and I know that it's really on a general level, but it's hard to I'm trying to put it in a way so everyone can understand what is our approach, how we run those discussions with clients, and what is the way of thinking about ESG. And it's also about, like we spoke about water, energy. Is also like one of the topics that is raising more and more on the agenda is the circular economy approach. So this gives like really it's like a complex, on one hand, it looks like really complex model or complex way of thinking, but it's not actually. And it's really applicable to every type of business. It's applicable to huge multinationals. And that's what, when I was actually working on with huge multinationals, but it could be applicable to public sector too, and to small, medium, and startup companies.
I think you brought up also a super important point, which is the communication, right? It's not just the internal goal setting. It's also about how you're talking to stakeholders, whether those are employees, investors, people who are using your product, or just the community that you're in, right? Serena, what do you think are maybe some examples of best practice in communicating those ESG priorities for startups and scale-ups?
Yes, so working for an academic institution, higher education institute like Aarhus University, I will leverage the terms that we usually have in grants and projects that we run. And in some of these projects, you're asked to have a communication strategy at the same time as a dissemination strategy. So what would be the difference between these two? Communication for a scale-up in this occasion would be something that you spread out in terms of messages and content using all your channels, all your digital assets, all your means of communication for everything that's happening in your entity, in your group, in the company, and then somewhere where you relate it to ESG. Let's say if there is something related to a new hire that belongs to a diverse group, or maybe you are expanding into a new region and you're applying some new regulations with regards to using the raw material or resources from this place. And then on the other hand, you might have to do some dissemination strategies too, meaning the actual activities, the simple acts that Mateusz and Evelina mentioned, the simple acts that you are taking on ESGs, you disseminate those and you assure that everybody who relates to these acts is informed. And in this case, in this dissemination activities, you might be a bit more specific on your targets, right, in the audience that you have. And you definitely frame the messaging different to allow for what I usually like to call in my pitch training, a call for action. So I communicate something to you. I let you know that I'm doing something in the E, something in the S and the G, but then I want something in return. I'm not here alone. I'm not doing it on my own. You have to do something here as well. You have to take some action so that my activity, the one that I'm just disseminating with you, has this snowball effect and is taken away then not just by my community where you belong, but also your community where some more belong, and so on and so forth in the larger places. As I mentioned before, these digital assets that the company might have need to be revised and checked again. The choice of language there will make a big difference. Of course, for some industries, you have to comply the language with some regulations or prior work done related to ESG or any of the other sustainable development programs. But what I really would recommend here in communications is that create a knowledge board in your organization, in your scale up. Call it a small scale think tank, call it a Google Drive folder, a board with some magazines and newspapers in the kitchen lounge, or once a week, half an hour talk with an external guest that you invite to inspire your colleagues. Use this knowledge board to organize all the inspiration that comes from your employees, your stakeholders, your communities, all the other parties, and then pick on that. at a later stage. If you see that this knowledge board is getting crowded and you are having so much cooler content that you thought before, maybe put someone to manage it and organize it, because you might have some radical ideas there that can actually translate into new business models or new offerings for you. And then my last advice here in communications would be take a look at your data. You might be drowning on it already as a scale-up, but there is a lot that the data can speak for you. And how can you communicate that data that sends a message for your ESG actions?
Mateus, what would you say about the communication question? And maybe you can give some examples from your experience as well, building a company.
Yes, communication. This is, of course, a key in every company, and especially, of course, you need to have a time. Right now, where most of the people are working remotely, and the communication definitely it's much harder. I remember the days where everybody been in the office, and communication between people was literally, you spent 2 hours of whole day just communicating about different stuff. Right now, you're lucky if you have some bio time between one meet and the other Zoom and then Teams. Then you're really lucky, at least for a toilet. So maybe putting a board in the toilet would be a good one, because that's the place where people definitely meet. No, but seriously, I think it's, of course, social media, and you can communicate clearly what you would like to achieve or do, but not doing some foolish stuff, I would say. Just as I would repeat myself, keep it simple. And as an example, is like, we said that in the startup that I'm running right now in Sherpy, we said like, we want to convince people that smart mobility have a different meaning. It's not that you're going to use the electric car. This is not smart mobility. It's not that you're going to buy electric bike because, at the ETH in Zurich, they proven that based on enormous example of e-bikes, it's actually harming the environment than helping. Why? Because the drivers don't change. They just buy another vehicle and use it from time to time, but somebody need to utilize the batteries after. And our idea was, okay, so if you're coming from point A to point B and you're already a driver, so maybe we can convince you based on the research, because as your Serena says, scale-ups are joining with data, but actually universities are. If the scale-ups are joining with data, then universities, I don't know, they're like a galactic of data, and nobody reads that ever. I mean, like once it's published, it's done. It's like a pail of papers, and that's it. So what we did, what we did when we started Sherpy, we just read those things, and so we didn't invent a wheel. We literally read what the smart guys have examined by years, and so like, okay, they said that there is not a technology like this, and there is this and this piece missing, and then we just put a puzzle, because on the end it's like a Lego, everything fits together, we're all human. And we came up with the solution that you can plan your trip. Maybe you can propose you leave your diesel car on the suburbs of the city, because if you leave it there, your parking is cheaper. So we actually tell you it's cheaper. So you save money, you save time, because the public transportation will get you to the city center faster. And then on the end, you save a CO2. So somebody can say, I'm driving a 2-liter diesel car and I'm saving CO2 more than the other guy who bought an electric bike. But that's the point. Keep it simple. Try to convincing people from the small stuff, just, like a drop of water. When we are still nearby the water, and then just go to the next step. Have, of course, this plan, but communicate that quite clearly. Yeah, and I think it's important.
I think also related to the issue of communications is who is responsible, like where does ESG sit within the organization, right? who's being held accountable, right? Who's pushing it forward? And I wanted to go back to a point, Serena, that you made earlier in the conversation, which was about the idea that these ideas can also spring from many different people in the organization. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you've seen that happen, but also who should be responsible in an organization for pushing an ESG agenda forward?
Yes. By the way, Mateusz University makes a lot of output indeed, and definitely there is quite a bit of these pieces that maybe are not as direct and easy to comprehend, and you can go through it. But what's important is to know the history, right? It's not necessarily that it's going to repeat itself, but it might rhyme. So we want to make sure we don't rhyme with what has already been published and worked on from the academic environment, but actually elevated in the future. So with regards to who's responsible in the ESG context in the business, well, usually CFOs has been responsible. We've seen that very common. Sometimes the board of directors have given some indicators to how to go with this. Sometimes I even recommend to non-formally have a chief happiness officer in the organization. So when somebody is not super excited or low mood and so on, then you need that. You can have many chiefs for that matter, the chief cook and the chief inspiration, all the rest. I don't believe that it can be a one-way stream, like top down or bottom up. I find it as a mix of initiatives, as different ways that you can get this going in your organization. But it might be important to appoint an ad hoc team or a few employees or team members that can follow it, that can keep track on it time by time. Sometimes investors might be pushy a lot more than maybe you were ready for it, because you were taking those the advice that we are giving to take it simple. So could be that from time to time you can onboard somebody externally or outsource that sort of task, but that should be for very short amount of time so that you don't lose that competitive advantage that that you would want. We see that today it's mostly the millennials and Gen Z that really care about this, and you should also allow for your employees to be the ambassadors on leading ESGs. They're the best ones to help you recruit and retain talent later on. And if you claim that, and then two colleagues in the coffee corner don't agree on some of the ESG practices, we'll see how that's going to go next. So I would say ad hoc teams to start with for the scale-ups before you make a big deal out of it, and then later on see if you can make it more structured practice by practice.
And Matthias, how does it work for you and your organization? Obviously, like impact is so central to your business model, but is there a person with whom the ESG agenda sits?
That's gonna be me.
We have you.
Yeah, because I think I would not hear like it needs to be somebody who have a vision what it can really be with this with those goals, and actually getting back a bit to what Serena said about in the beginning about universities. It crossed to my mind because I have those kind of visions. A lot of students are doing the PhD. I mean, they're doing the master degree, they're doing the bachelor degree, and they always look for the maybe some 6 months or 3 months in the company. It's quite often. I mean, in Switzerland, it's like it's a standard. You're obliged to. Maybe that would be but most of those students, they don't have any experience. I mean, you cannot expect that they have the experience because they are young. But what they might have a knowledge, or they might come to your organization being before trained in the university to build up some sort of program, or to build up some plan, or to help talk to the others in the organization and or in a startup, in a scale-up, proposing something or seeing things from the different perspective of a young person, which helps, as you mentioned, like most of the young people or millennials, they are not anymore young. Sorry to say, but yeah, to really implement some new vision for that, but definitely execution of that needs to come. And one thing on top of that, what I would like to say is that, and I'm always repeating myself with this, there is no sustainability without profitability. It's like many big organizations will say amazing, beautiful words. They will produce amazing presentations, colorful, but on the end, you know, if it goes to CFO, and the CFO is a master of Excel, and then says, oh no, it cost 1.02%, sorry, we are cutting the budget, that's just no. So in this case, if when you build the sustainable goals, you should consider that the sustainable goals can be profitable. And of course, if they are profitable, then maybe this profit can be covering also the ones that are not, or maybe the ones that are demanding more work from you. It's just, and once you see that this works and this really brings some value, everything gets easier. But, yeah.
Evelina, maybe you could talk a little bit about that cost and maybe
I will, but I just want to comment on what was said about assigning someone to actually to being like ESG responsible person. And like with my experience because I have like almost 10 years of experience analyzing and discussing the topic with companies, mostly with large caps, but this could be actually copy paste to startups and the scale ups too. It's like, first of all, you have to have someone who is on the strategic level responsible for ESG topics, but this person is only like on the high level, and those people that are really like a core of the company, the internal one, should be also responsible for pushing the agenda and actually to shaping it to some extent. So I think this is really important to keep in mind that on the strategic level, but also on the operational level, you have to have people responsible for it.
Definitely.
And about the cost, how have you engaged with companies in the past to kind of help them get to the point where they can see that this is actually really going to actually be profitable?
Yeah, I mean, the thing of costs and the thing of profitability, it's something that is being like constantly discussed, and unfortunately we don't have like any concrete data or proofs that yes, if you do this it will bring you such profit. But for sure, if you are first of all, if you have a good overview of your supply chain, so then you're better prepared because you're like future-proofing your business, because you are ready for any kind of disruption concerning the supply of resources. The same when you're applying circular economy approach, you're just cutting the cost because you're shifting from this linear take, make, and waste approach to more circular one. So it's also about cutting costs. The same when you're changing the light bulbs to more energy one. It's like those are the practical things that you're applying this way. You're saving energy, saving money, and you're helping the environment. So this is the main thing.
So we're getting down to time. So I just kind of wanted to do a rapid fire question with everyone to close the panel, which is, if you could just have, one or two sentences to give advice to a team at a startup or a scale-up who really wants to be serious about ESG, what would you tell them? Serena?
Yes, I actually regret having this flu and not being there to continue the conversation with some beer or champagne or whatever. But thank you for listening to us. And what I can say is mostly be proactive, allow for some different initiatives in your scale up, dedicate a couple of hours every week among the employees and the teams that show some readiness and already adaptation to ESGs. Then maybe include leaders and industry experts to do these iterations of what you're finding internally in your local search and expanding that with some of this explicit or external knowledge as well, and then see what kind of results you can sort of say publish or encourage further after this proactiveness in the organization. Take it easy. In a couple of years, we will have another term for ESGs. So mostly get into that as a methodology to do things better and with higher impact, just like any entrepreneur in startup scale up really cares about. So that will be my bit.
I think, first of all, you should not be intimidated by ESG. It's not a huge concept. Those are really everyday things that you're already doing, but you're not aware of them. And probably this new name brings like a scare that, okay, it's something, it's like rocket science. It's not. And you should think about it like a really simple concept where you can find yourself. And of course, you have to accept the fact that there will be challenges. But it also brings lots of value to you as a company, but also to your employees and the local communities. And you should ask for help.
Very solid advice. Mateus.
I actually agree about this help asking. Yeah, and yeah, for me, it's just, keep it simple. Start from the small stuff and, have a vision, of course, obviously, but just start from the small stuff. It always helps. And, I remember when the garbage collection in houses started, I remember the start, like when the people were saying, no, I should do it. It's terrible, more No. Right now, honestly, myself, I cannot imagine myself not segregating because it's like, it's cheaper, it's better, it's simpler. Everybody thinks about this plastic everywhere, and that's this awareness of the problem that somebody can have a vision about, the rest might not see. But then if you use the small things and you have small steps, you can convince them. You can convince anybody to anything. You just need the time and you need to be, into this, not give up, because it's easy to give up if you're a startup. But if you don't give up and people see that, they will follow.
I love it. So my takeaway today is ESG is not a big scary monster. Break it down, take it easy, simple steps. Thank you guys. I learned a lot. Great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Serena, for joining us from afar.